Welcome to the Re-1 Valley School District and Colorado School Finance presentation. This is Dr. Jan DeLay, the Superintendent of Re-1 Valley School District. This presentation was developed by our Board of Education and me as a way to communicate to our community about the impact of the state funding in Colorado and how it affects Re-1 Valley School District. This information is to inform our citizens about the school finance in Re-1 Valley School District. Our mission in Re-1 Valley School District is educating each student today for tomorrow. We're educating students to be tomorrow's young adults, parents, business owners, agricultural professionals, and industry leaders. Re-1 Valley, small enough to be nimble, large enough to offer choices and excellence. We're adding career and technical education choices every year. Our students win state and national championships. They are award winners despite the steep funding cuts. Throughout Colorado, since 1992, the funding per pupil in this state has decreased each and every year. In the 2012 report displayed on the screen, this illustrates the state funding gaps endured by Colorado students since 1992. Our students currently have a gap of over $2,000 per student from the U.S. average. And how does Colorado rank nationally with this U.S. average? According to the Quality Counts report in 2016, data from 2013 indicates the U.S. average is $11,667 per student. This compares to the Colorado average of 2013 of $8,986. This average has gone down every year and continues to go down in this year, 2016. The Colorado School Finance Act was enacted in 1994 by our state legislature. The message at that time was that the quality of education should not be determined by a child's zip code. At that time, the legislature enacted a base funding plus factor funding to create a per-pupil revenue. The local share of property taxes is added to the state share. This slide represents a very basic look at school finance. In the state of Colorado, districts have total district funding equalized by the state. The way this looks in Re-1 Valley is our local taxpayers pay 35% of the share for per pupil spending, and the state equalizes that amount with 65%. We have a second bucket that our district is able to use for educating students with special needs or adding extra curriculum supports that are funded by grants. It's important to know that these funding sources that are from grants must be spent in a specific way and they cannot be added to the general fund. The illustration on the top of the general fund programming budget is intended to illustrate the mill levy override that our voters enacted in 2005. Our mill levy currently helps our district budget by adding about 2.5% of our total program funding. This is a funding source that goes on top of the state allocation, and the state does not decrease funding for school districts that have passed mill levy overrides to add additional funding for their students' education. Another important thing to remember in our school finance talk is the Gallagher Amendment that was enacted in 1982. This was a statewide vote that was in response to fears that homeowners would be paying more than their fair share in property taxes. The end result is that we have a constitutional amendment that requires businesses to pay 29% of property value taxed and residents to pay 7.9% of total property taxed. This is an important thing to know because in 1989, shortly after this act was passed, this worked out pretty well. We had a state share of about 43% and a local share at about 57%. In 2015, our state share has grown to 69% and the local share is at 31%. Our citizens should be aware that this is really what causes school districts to have financial slowdowns when the state has a financial slowdown. The other thing that we'd like to point out is that we've had many changes in Re-1 Valley since 1996, 2 years after the school finance bill was passed. We've had gradual enrollment decline. We have 644 less students because of smaller families, declining in area population, and school choice options. One illustration on this slide talks about a school bus route in 1999. If we had that same route today and didn't reroute that bus, a student on that bus that had 66 students in 1999 would be the only student on that bus today. So we have many students from our farming and ranching families who grow up and leave for the Front Range. We also have an increase in at-risk student population by more than 400 students since 1996. These students are more expensive to educate. These are students with disabilities, students from poverty, students with mental health issues, students with physical disabilities. We've also had a dramatic increase in unfunded mandates. We have fire codes that we must adhere to. We have Department of Labor rules. We have Office of Civil Rights reports, and many other state and federal regulations that have no funding tied to them. We also have huge increases in our technology use, and we use technology every minute of every day in 2016. Other increased costs include our health care for our teachers, retirement, and transportation. Now we look at this and say, okay, we have lots of new requirements, but schools have funding increases every year. The fact of the matter is that since the 2010 recession, we have had money taken away from us in school districts across this state every year since 2010. We've had percentage cuts in per pupil funding statewide by $855.2 million. That's approximately 12% of annual cuts in funding for most school districts. This translates to a $13.7 million cut in total from Re-1 Valley School District from 2010. This slide illustrates the 2015-16 Re-1 base funding plus the factors, so that our citizens can understand what's happening at the state level. Our base funding per pupil is $6,292.39 in fiscal year 15-16. This is what every school district gets throughout the state. Under that, we add the factors. These are factors calculated by the state to address the unique local conditions of each school district. So there's personnel factors, cost of living factors, non-personnel factors, size factors, and at-risk factors. That gets us in Re-1 Valley to a subtotal of just about $8,000 per student per year that Re-1 Valley should see. But because of the legislation in 2010, when we were in the Great Recession, $962.95 is then taken away, and our total funding for last year was $6,973.87. This translates into an annual loss of over $2 million per year for our district in Re-1 Valley. This loss of $2 million a year has been occurring since 2010. So what does this mean for our district compared to the state averages? We've always had a funding problem in Re-1 Valley because we've always been below the state average. This slide shows how our district is below the state average, but because of the 2010 average going down because of the negative factor, Re-1 Valley is now at a new district funding low that is also below the state average. You can see that we are about $2 million below, or $2,000 per student below the state average. Some of our citizens say, well, wait a minute, what about that marijuana tax? I saw in that blue book, funding from marijuana, from recreational marijuana, would go to school districts. That's one of the reasons I voted for it. Well, that's true. What was in the fine print in the amendment to our Constitution was that it required all of this tax to go to capital construction only, in the form of competitive grants. None of this tax goes directly to any school district. Grants are highly competitive, and for Re-1 Valley, if we were to get a grant to build a school with marijuana money, we would have a 45% cash match requirement for that money. Next, we want to have a talk about the impact of inadequate state funding. School districts across the state who have been impacted by this state funding have had to go into their reserves every year, and this is the same with Re-1 Valley. Since 2011, Re-1 Valley has dipped into their reserves in order to meet the increased costs of health care, retirement, technology, textbook adoption, and teacher salaries. This next slide illustrates the impact of the cuts since the Great Recession in yellow, and where our budget would be if we did not have the negative factor, which is illustrated by the red boxes. If Re-1 Valley did not have the negative factor computed into our funding formula, we would not have a $2 million shortfall. Why is the state still cutting? We're in a recovery from the recession. Why are school districts still being used as the piggy banks for the state? Our state has a Medicaid expansion, both federal matches that are required, and they increase every year. And we also have an aging population in Colorado that also increase the cost of Medicaid. We have transportation needs that have certain funding matches that are required in order to obtain federal funding matches. K-12 funding is one of the only categories in the state budget that can be decreased without federal funding ramifications. The next slide is a slide of the state finance that shows K-12 funding is 40% of the state budget. Health and Human Services is 32% of the state budget. Public safety, which is prisons, is 12% of the state budget. Many of these costs are not allowed to be cut, and so school districts are the beneficiaries of those cuts. But what have we done to do our part to tighten our belts? In the last 10 years, we've consolidated schools. We closed an alternative school. We've made cuts in athletics. We've made cuts in our teaching staff, our administrative staff, support staff. We've deferred maintenance in many of our buildings and our athletic facilities. We have deferred school bus replacement. Many of our school buses have over 200,000 miles on them. And we've had several years of salary freezes. We're trying to be responsible stewards. We've created an energy savings contract that included a guaranteed savings every year because of energy enhancements. We've aligned and organized our online resources rather than make textbook purchases. We've stopped paying extra duty stipends for work that we saw that was completed during the workday. We've decreased our water services, where drinking water is provided by the city because of the new city water, and canceled all of the drinking water with the exception of the early childhood program, which requires this water for preschool licensing, and caliche, which is yet to have potable water. And we're truly trying to strengthen our school district to go from good to great. We believe we can have a great school district. Some of these strengthening strategies include the safety and structural enhancements that we've created at each building in the last 3 years. We now have locks, we have video cameras, and we have increased security in our buildings. We offer full-day kindergarten for all of our students. We've developed a blended learning online program for students who don't quite meet the brick and mortar comfort in our schools. We've increased our career and technical education offerings. We've made environmental improvements to our school districts that are included with that energy plan. So we have air conditioning that works. We have heating that works. We've increased our concurrent enrollment with NJC, thus saving students and parents money when they go to college. They have several credits that they've had in their high school years. We continue to value small class sizes for our students. And we have a focus on strategies to improve the climate and culture with staff and students. So some of the solutions that districts are looking at in these severe funding cuts are local community support. All Front Range districts, except Greeley, have passed overrides in the past 5 years to support strong local schools. Holyoke, Yuma, Pawnee, and Briggsdale have passed mill levy overrides to support their schools in the past 5 years. What would this look like for an average homeowner in Re-1 Valley? This slide indicates the taxes of a single-family home since 1994. This home in Sterling had a tax rate of $469 per year in 1994 with a mill of 52.135. In 2016, this same house had an annual tax rate of $392 per year and a mill of 38.75. If the district were to pass a mill levy override, this home would be paying $92 more per year in 2017 than they did this year. The 2005 mill levy that our taxpayers approved granted $500,000 per year for the district to use with technology, transportation, textbooks, and maintenance. This continues to be the case, and the district is audited on this every year. This slide indicates the agricultural averages per quarter if the district were to pass a $2 million mill levy override to make up for negative funding. Sprinkler, flood, dryland, and pasture are indicated on this slide. And a $100,000 business would have an annual tax rate of $264 per year. Our closing questions are: what type of school district do we want for our community? Our district has increased student performance, student achievement in the past 3 years. How do we continue the momentum and attract new businesses and families? Below is the contact information. If you have ideas, you can email me, Jan DeLay, at Re-1 Valley Schools. And the next few slides in this presentation are references to other constitutional amendments that impact state funding that I haven't discussed today, but they're here for your reference with links to the internet. Thank you very much.